Hey guys, welcome back to the DrCliffAuD vlog. This is vlog number 98, and today I'm going to be talking to you about money, specifically in the context of Medicare and how Medicare reimburses hearing care professionals currently and what it could mean down the road if this Build Back Better Act actually gets passed in its current form with the amount of money that they're allocating to hearing aids. And I had a fantastic comment left by a patient, not a patient, by a YouTube viewer about 5 days ago and he did the math on what the Build Back Better Act would mean for reimbursement and all of that and what they would cover for hearing aids. And before I get into this comment that I want to break down, if you guys could do me a favor and click the like button for this video, I really appreciate it. It helps this video get a few more views and get in front of a few more individuals who may be interested in this type of content. So I thank you for that in advance. Now, going to this individual's comment, Don S., I'm not sure if Don has commented on my channel before, but I need someone like this in my life to help break down numbers for me because I am not necessarily a numbers guy. It is what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into it, and I'm going to go ahead and post it up here as well as I read through it. So Don S. commented, I did the math on the $370 million that is in the bill to cover a 7-year period. And by the way, that won't all go for hearing aids. It will probably include implementation expenses, which is a 2-year gap between funding and implementation. Let's assume it all would go to hearing aids for this context, though, which would be just under $53 million per year. Assuming a $2,000 allowance for each pair of hearing aids, that would provide 26,428 patients a year with a pair of aids. Multiply that by 7 years, and the whole legislation provides 185,000 patients with aids. I think you can assume that the allowance will be well under $2,000 per patient. At $1,500 per patient, it fits 246,666 patients. Not that many given the scope of the problem. Then the question becomes, how many hearing impaired patients will want hearing aids? There are millions of them who today can easily afford hearing aids and still find the concept abhorrent. When the aids are free, will the attitudes change? I cannot express enough how much I appreciate Don S., if you're watching this video, for breaking this down for everyone else who's watching this video. It really kind of goes to show how not far $370 million goes when it comes to hearing treatment. When you start considering $2,000 per individual for hearing aids, first of all, that doesn't cover much of a hearing aid, and that also doesn't cover much in terms of care, which is somewhat concerning. I think in Don's case, he's talking specifically about hearing aids here, but you have to consider all of the audiologic services that go into getting hearing aids for an individual. And when you consider all of that, it changes things a little bit in terms of what someone is actually going to get with their Medicare coverage. Now, when you start thinking about there's like 30 million individuals in the United States with hearing loss, solving that problem for 246,000 of them is like a tiny drop in the bucket when you really think about it. But the other question that he poses here is, if the hearing aids were entirely free, let's say that there was no out-of-pocket expense whatsoever for an individual who has Medicare other than their, a couple $100 deductible that they have to pay each year. But are people going to change their attitudes when it comes to actually accepting hearing treatment? Because he's absolutely right. There are a lot of individuals who could easily just pay whatever for hearing aids, but they just don't want to for whatever the reasons are. Maybe they just don't like the fact that they do cost a good amount of money. Maybe they don't like the idea that they have to go in and see a hearing care professional. Maybe they have some aversion to the stigma associated with hearing loss. I don't know. But, it does beg the question of, if these hearing aids are made more affordable and accessible, will that actually increase the number substantially? There is some data to suggest that it is going to have a marginal increase on treatment acceptance rates when you start looking at countries who provide completely free hearing aids to the people in their country that are under their healthcare system, their universal healthcare system. It doesn't actually increase the percentage of adoption that much higher. So what will actually happen in this case, who knows? But the other thing that I want to talk about here is how Medicare reimbursement actually works. Now, currently, really, one of the few things that Medicare covers in terms of audiologic services is the cost of a hearing test. Now, inside of my clinic, if you were to come in and privately pay for a hearing test, it would be $69 for that hearing test, and that does not include any extras like speech and noise testing or tympanometry or anything like that. It is purely just the actual hearing test, and then it also covers the intake portion, because we have to do some kind of a case history beforehand, and you have to review the results, or at least we feel like we have to review the results with the patient. I'm sure that there's plenty of places that do not do much of a review, and this is the reason why. If someone comes in with Medicare, we have to abide by the Medicare allowed amount because we have accepted assignment from Medicare. What that actually means is that if Medicare says, you know what, we think that a hearing test should cost the patient $38.06, then if we are a part of Medicare, if we're a Medicare provider, we have to say, okay, then we are going to only accept $38.06 to cover the entire cost of that hearing test. So right off the bat, you're gonna shave, what is that, $30 off of our costs, so almost cutting it down in half for what we actually get reimbursed for that hearing test. Now, Medicare picks up 80% of that, and then a supplement will pick up the remaining 20%, and if an individual does not have a supplement or, secondary to pick up the remaining 20%, then the patient has to pay the remaining 20%. So Medicare ends up paying roughly like $30, and then the patient ends up paying like $7, or the secondary ends up paying like $7. All total, it's like $38.06. But when you start to factor in like how long it would take us to cover our cost of actually administering those hearing tests, it is quite comical, and I'm going to share that with you right now. And again, this is the whole reason why that if Medicare chooses to assign a value of how much we can charge to a Medicare recipient, then it is strong grounds for all hearing care professionals to get out of Medicare, because if we accept assignment at really, really low rates, like a hearing test rate, then we would likely just go out of business, and that's what it is. But I want to explain it so you can understand it a little bit more, and I'll try to put these numbers up so it makes a little bit more sense for you. So when it comes to the cost of equipment to actually furnish a space inside of an audiology clinic to conduct a hearing test, you need a few things. You need a test booth, you need a computer, and you need an audiometer at bare minimum. And I'm not even considering all of the ancillary things that you need, like insert tips that go into your ears or the headphones or anything like that. And when you start to look at what the total fixed cost would be of all of this equipment, roughly you're looking at around $32,000. It can go significantly higher than that, and it could go a little bit lower than that depending on the type of booth and depending on the type of computer and audiometer that someone ultimately chooses to go with, or that a hearing care professional ultimately chooses to go with. Now, you have to also figure that there is an individual who is conducting the testing. So at this point in time for Medicare, it has to be an audiologist. Now, maybe it'll end up being a hearing instrument specialist, who knows, but it's going to have to be an audiologist. And when you think of, I think the median income for an audiologist is around $70,000 a year. So you've got to figure that if you take roughly 30 to 35 minutes per hearing test, meaning that includes intake, it includes conducting a very, very fast hearing test, and some percentage of time allotted for earwax removal that will not be reimbursed for by Medicare, because audiologists cannot bill Medicare for cerumen removal. We have to perform it as part of that reimbursement for the hearing test to conduct the actual hearing test. So there's a certain amount of time that it takes to do that. It can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on how severely impacted a patient is. But if you just figure out, okay, what is the cost of the provider to conduct a hearing test? And it comes out to about $20.40 for the hearing care professional to take the time to actually conduct the hearing test. Which means that the amount of money that you would actually make per hearing test to pay for all of the other expenses would be $17.66 per hearing test. Now, you have to consider that the cost of the room, meaning like the rent just for the space of the room that the test booth is in for all of the hearing testing, is $3,000, at least in my clinic, would be worth $3,342 a year. Now, we have 2 rooms, but I'm only going to consider 1 room, 1 test booth room into this calculation. That means from a monthly perspective, you would have to conduct 15.75 hearing tests per month just to cover the cost of the rent of that room each month. Now, we end up doing about 40 tests per month inside of our clinic, and we are 2 basically full-time providers, so it's about 20 hearing tests per provider inside of the clinic, which means that we have 24.25 tests left over per month that we would actually make money on in order to pay off the actual fixed expenses of the equipment. Now again, if we actually earn $17.66 per test after we've paid the hearing care professional, and we have 24.25 tests left over that we could actually use to collect on, because all the rest of those tests were used to pay the rent of that room, then we would actually make $428 per month on hearing tests that would go towards paying off the equipment. Now, it would take 74.76 months to pay off that equipment that we did to conduct the testing, which means it would take 6.25 years to pay off the equipment. And so you would not actually make any money off of conducting hearing tests for 6.25 years. And you would have to assume that over the course of 6.25 years, not only would the cost of rent go up, the cost of the audiologist would likely go up, and the equipment has to be replaced at some point. Audiometer equipment, computer equipment, you're looking at around 7 years if you're lucky to have to replace that equipment. Fortunately, the sound booth that ends up costing 17 to 20 grand, you can use that almost indefinitely unless there's something major that goes wrong with that sound booth. But in general, you have a whole new list of fixed expenses that come up at that 6, 7, 8 year mark anyway, and then you're just kind of spinning your wheels. So basically meaning it is almost virtually impossible to make any money conducting hearing tests under Medicare. Now, right now, hearing tests are basically a loss leader. And what I mean by that is people come in for a hearing test. Oftentimes they would need to receive treatment with hearing aids, and then you would make up the amount of money that you lose conducting hearing tests to actually turn a profit in a clinic, be able to pay everybody, keep the lights on, pay the rent, pay myself, and then have some profit left over for the company in order for us to grow or invest or whatever the case may be. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is what would happen to every single service that is included under Medicare. So when you start thinking about test box measures, you start thinking about performing realer measurement, you start thinking about programming hearing aids, you start thinking about doing a hearing aid cleaning or maintenance or repairs or anything like that. If Medicare says, like, I know that you guys charge like $300 to perform a detailed programming, we think that really you should charge $48 for that. And that's what we're going to pay you is $48. Then it becomes a question of like, man, like, should I even conduct these services? Because every time I conduct them, I'm just losing money, or it's going to take me until the day I retire to break even. Like, you just can't do it. There's no way that you can make the numbers work. And I just think that a lot of hearing care professionals and clinics are just going to say, you know what? We think it's great that you're increasing accessibility and affordability for individuals, but there is not enough money to be made here to justify staying in business, or to, essentially you're losing money every single time you see a Medicare patient. And this is exactly why concierge medicine is actually taking off. Medical doctors have had these issues, is that insurance dictates what they do. And, for a lot of the doctors out there that are like, you know what, I'm not going to let an actuary and an insurance company tell me how to take care of my patients and what things should cost inside of my clinic. And what happens is that they're just like, you know what, I'm going out of network with all insurances, and if you want to receive a higher quality of care, you can pay out of pocket and come to me. And that's what basically started concierge medicine. So if this does happen, which I still think it can be beneficial if they set it up the right way for everybody, I think it can increase accessibility and affordability and not sacrifice quality at the same time. I don't know exactly how they're going to do that, but it would have to start with making sure that reimbursement rates are high enough. But when you start breaking down the numbers of how many patients they would need to serve with only $370 million over the course of 7 years, like, that is just not going to cut it. So we may just see concierge audiology pop up all over the place, and the individuals who want to receive low quality care that is covered 100% under Medicare, because there's no way you're going to get to receive quality care under Medicare in this circumstance, because a clinic couldn't make money if they spent enough time with you to actually conduct best practice audiologic care. So at this point, I think I've proven my point, and I know that there are many of you out there who are just going to bash me for saying, Cliff, the only thing you care about is money. Why are you trying to make us feel bad for you and all of that? And that's fine. You guys can say whatever you want to say. I see how things are going here with this Medicare thing. I know a lot of people have commented that, Cliff, there's no way it's going to get passed anyway, because you will never get all 50 senators who are on the Democratic side of the aisle to vote in favor of this particular act. Even though they hold the tiebreaker, there are still some relatively conservative Democratic senators that are in the Senate. And so there are some people who say it's all a moot point, and maybe it is all a moot point, but I've got nothing better to do with my Saturday other than to speculate on what's actually going to happen here. So that being said, I feel like I've beat the horse dead enough at this point. Again, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And as always, guys, I will see you next week.